if we were to really reflect upon it, this is one of the great characteristics that allows us to be the best of ummahs, the best of nations. That if we are striving to do what is good and we are hastening towards enjoining what is good and what is acceptable, and we are forbidding amongst ourselves to stay away from the munkar, that this is the work of those individuals, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that these are the individuals who are definitely the righteous. And we find in the verses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. So once again we're seeing this enjoining al-ma'ruf and prohibiting the munkar, that this is one of the main characteristics and this is one of the main qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights, that is a part of our duty and responsibility towards each other. One of the things that we have to be able to do is we have to be able to be Muslims who are constantly enjoining upon each other to do what is good and prohibiting or discouraging each other to stay away from munkar and all of those things that are unacceptable. And it is these individuals who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those individuals, Allah has ukhrijat linnas, Allah has raised them, or Allah has elevated their status as an example. And at the same time, we are finding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and these are the individuals who truly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a very important characteristic that we have to be able to understand and grasp in a very, very positive way. A part of our belief, a part of our wala, a part of our coming together as an ummah, believing in Allah and His Messenger, it is enjoining what is good upon each other, and it is prohibiting what is evil, in order for us to be a part of this unique brotherhood that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned and has made a cornerstone reality for our success. Listen to the next verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْدٍ. That the believing men and the believing women, they are awliya, they are protectors, they are helpers, they are supporters of one another. Under what condition? يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. So two of the, or four very unique characteristics is those who are believing men and believing women who have the duty of protecting, supporting one another. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they enjoin what is good, what is just, and they prohibit what is evil, what is corrupt, and what is deceptive. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. So one of the active qualities for many of us is that we are striving to pray together. This is one of the great qualities and characteristics of the believers, that they come and they bow down with those who bow down. This is one of the unique, and what else do they do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they give the zakat. They are those who help each other, and they are those who support each other, not only with their concerns for their behavior and their obedience, but even with their physical support, that they are those who will give zakat for those who are less fortunate than them, in order for them to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of being believers. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions more. He says, وَيُطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. And they are those who obey Allah and His Messenger. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُولَٰئِكَ سَيَرْحَمُهُمُ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah will have mercy on them. Surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is almighty, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. So there are a number of ahadith that Imam al-Nawawi, he mentions that is related to this chapter. And inshallah, I'll just mention a few, and inshallah, we'll try to stop at a reasonable time. So one of the things that we should keep in mind about hastening to do good deeds in order to be protected from a fitna. This is one of the unique qualities and characteristics, that we should be striving to hasten towards good deeds in order for us not to be afflicted with fitnas or some trials and some tribulations that might come our way. And Imam Nawawi, he mentions the case, or he mentions the saying of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and hasten to do good deeds before you are overtaken by one of the 7 afflictions. And he mentions the the 7 afflictions. He says the first one is that are you waiting for poverty to come upon you, which will make you unmindful of your devotion? So this is a great fitna. And unfortunately, we find that this is a case for many brothers and sisters, that they can be afflicted with some poverty, some situation, and some circumstance in their life, to the point where they can't focus on their ibadah. They can't focus on their worship. They can't focus on them striving to do the things that would draw them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of their situation and their circumstance. And this is something that many of us can understand. This happens to us. We have brothers and sisters within our community that might be struggling with financial situation and circumstance, and because of that, they just can't seem to focus and strengthen themselves to, be those who are, regular in their prayers, or regular in their acts of worship, and regular in their acts of enjoining the good and prohibiting the evil. So this is a type of fitna that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said is one of the 7 afflictions. Number 2, he says that prosperity which will make you corrupt. So this is the opposite. An individual might come into a great fortune of money, and it is that great fortune of money that will turn an individual in an opposite direction. And unfortunately, this is a fitna. If an individual is worried so much about his financial status and his financial circumstance that it will begin to corrupt an individual, and it would cause an individual not to understand the principles of the deen, how to give in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they have this insatiable desire and love for the dunya in this life. Number 3, or a disease which will debilitate a person. So physical diseases and sicknesses that will cause an individual to be debilitated. They can't worship, they can't do things because of the sickness. And unfortunately, we find that this happens with an individual who might have a circumstance, and because of that condition that he or she might have, that we see that it is a major fitna for that person. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not test us in these circumstances, in these situations. Sometimes an individual might be saying, oh, well, if it was me, I would be able to maintain, and I would be able to, regroup and organize myself in a way so I can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give us the strength and the understanding, and to keep us in good health and well-being, and to not test us with things that we might not be able to endure and to maintain. So number 1, poverty. Number 2, prosperity and wealth. Number 3, an individual's situation in his health. And number 4 is an individual becoming senile, which will make an individual mentally unstable. And subhanAllah, we know Alzheimer's and dementia and these things. We have some individuals, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions this in the Quran, where an individual can reach an age of full strength and full mental capacity, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns them back to a very minor stage where they can't do basic things like even remember some of the name of their family members, or even it can be so severe that individuals forget how to, there's some people who have dementia, they can even forget how to swallow. They can forget how to chew their food. And this is a severe level. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is telling us that we should seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from senility, or being senile, because this thing can also be something that can disable It make an individual's his mental strength, his mental stability. It can cripple it. Number 5, sudden death, which will take you unexpectedly. And subhanAllah, here in our community here, just this week alone, we had one brother. He went to bed. I think he was about 66. He just went to bed and he never woke up. Okay, so he just went to sleep and he never woke up. And then we have other situations, and we see when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an individual, and the emphasis here is sudden death. And we know with sudden death, sometimes if an individual is on hospice, if an individual is suffering from some chronic situation and circumstance, maybe this is a gradual way for an individual to say that, maybe he or she won't be around for too much longer. But sudden death is when an individual just ups and they pass away. And unfortunately, sometimes, with younger people, we see that this is very, very difficult because, of course, we are having every expectation that they will live a long and prosperous life. Number 6, ad-Dajjal, who is the worst expected one to come. So, this is one of the fitnas. And one of the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that there will come a time when the Imam, that he won't speak about a Dajjal on the minbar. This is one of the signs. Even though a Dajjal is one of the major fitnas that will occur in the life of the human being, is when the Dajjal comes, and there's so many descriptions and so many ahadith that talks about how he will look, when he will come, how long he will stay, the kind of fitna that he will cause on the planet Earth. And we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from fitna to Dajjal, from the fitna that will be caused by a Dajjal. And we should not be those type of people who have this idea that, if a Dajjal was in my time and period, that I would be able to withstand or to be able to endure the type of fitna that he will come with. The 7th one is the hour, or the hour will be the most grievous and the most bitter. So the time of the day of judgment, that this is also a very, very severe fitna that will occur. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, to guide us, and to help us to understand the severity of these types of fitnas that will come upon mankind. One of the next traditions that Imam Nawawi has mentioned, he said, be prompt with good deeds to repel the fitna that is like the dark and the murky night. To be prompt, to hasten to repel or to push off a fitna that will be like the dark and murky night. He said, a man will be a believer in the morning and he will turn to a disbeliever by the evening. Or he will be a believer in the evening and he will turn to a disbeliever by the morning. And he will sell his religion for some worldly good. So this is a type of fitna that we see that will affect an individual's iman. It will affect a person's faith, to the point where an individual, he will be a believer in the morning, and by evening he will be a disbeliever. Or he will be a believer by evening, and he will turn to a disbeliever by the morning. And unfortunately, one of the sad characteristics is he will sell his religion for some worldly gain in this life. And we don't want to get too far off into some of these characteristics of those who are, cashing their religion in for some worldly benefits. And we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this type of situation and circumstance. So my dear brothers and sisters, inshallah ta'ala, I'd just like to close with one of the things that we should be seeking refuge in, that is a part of this hastening towards good deeds before we are struck by what is called as the iktishaf al-fitna. The iktishaf al-fitna, or the iktishaf al-fitna, is unveiling or revealing something that was hidden because of fitna. And we find this thing happening now, that many people that they are beginning to see and they're beginning to understand who they are and who some of their colleagues are and who some of their leaders are according to the fitna that is occurring. And all of us, we are familiar with the situation in Gaza, in Palestine, and in West Bank, that this thing is causing such a unique unveiling of situations and circumstances that we see the people are beginning to be divided into two camps. Either they are those people who are striving to stay on the side of what is right, what is humanly acceptable, or they are standing with the oppressors. And one of the sayings of Malcolm X that is very, very unique, Malcolm X, Shabazz, he has said that if an individual, if he or she doesn't look at the news, then an individual will become uninformed. And then if an individual does look at the news, then they will become misinformed. He said to the point where an individual, he will love the oppressed, he will love the oppressor, and he will dislike the oppressed. He will love the oppressor, and he would dislike the oppressed. So sometimes the propaganda and the filthy twisting of events and circumstances, if an individual is not careful, an individual can be misguided, and he or she can be, someone who's twisted in their understanding because they're listening to propaganda that will change them. And this is something that's very, very unique because it is already known that, any type of oppressor, any type of tyrant, that they need a group of people who are ignorant. They need people who are not informed. But once people become informed on situations, you begin to see that even the fitrah, their natural disposition will begin to come out, and people will begin to incline towards what is acceptable and what is considered to be, something that is within the realms of humanity. And we see that this is occurring around us in very, very unique ways. And for us, we have to be honest. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, there are many non-Muslims who appear to be coming to the surface and who are beginning to protest and to beginning to raise their voice more than many of the Muslims are, because of this natural disposition that they have towards humanity and striving to defend what is just and to defend those people who are being oppressed. So, in many ways we see that they are the non-Muslims who are getting arrested. They are the non-Muslims who are quitting their high-profile positions because of some of the atrocities that they're seeing going on in Gaza and in Palestine. And this is something that we have to keep in mind. So as Muslims, we have to be able to raise our voices. We have to be able to understand some of the avenues that can be taken in order for us to be a part of raising our voices. We know there's not too much more we can do. The brother, he mentioned the BDS movement, where we can do boycotting and divestment and sanctions and things of this nature. We should try our best to do as much as we can do. But one of the things that we can do in a very, very unique way is we can speak out. And sometimes speaking out is educating ourselves on the situation and circumstance. So we should be those who are trying to get a good grasp and a good understanding on what's going on, and become, all of us, each and every one of us, to become ambassadors, to become those who can speak and those who can explain and those who can clarify certain situations that have been clouded under the circumstance of propaganda. And unfortunately, sometimes this propaganda is very, very weak and is not convincing. And we see many people coming out and are not accepting some of these talking points that are being perpetrated by the oppressors in this particular situation. So we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, to strengthen us, to guide us, and to forgive us. My last point in this ikhtishaf, this unveiling or this revealing of a situation and circumstance, is Qadi Iyad, one of the scholars of the past. He said, as long as we are in a state of afiyah, a well-being, security, as long as we are in a state of afiyah, our situation is subdued. meaning that our situation is kind of like subdued and we're not understanding some of the realities on who we are and who the people are that we're dealing with. He said, but once we are struck with a musibah, once we are struck with a calamity and an affliction, he said, then the one who has faith, that his faith becomes manifest, and the one who is a hypocrite, his hypocrisy becomes manifest, it becomes surfaced. So we can see that, this fitna is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using to unmask the situation in order for us to understand who is who and what position or what stance does an individual have because of the calamity or the affliction that an individual might find himself witnessing. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, to forgive us, and to help us incline towards our faith, to incline towards our iman, to look towards the book of Allah in order for us to get guidance and get understanding as to what is occurring, in order for us to have what is called the firasa. Firasa is to have some insight and some understanding in our particular situation according to what Allah has mentioned in the Quran and in the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet said that the firasa of the believer, it is something we should be aware of. To be aware of the firasa of the believer because he or she, they see with the nur of Allah. And one of the things about the nur of Allah is looking at every situation and every circumstances according to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we will find that we will have ample enough guidance and understanding and insight in the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to understand, to have good foundation as to situations and circumstances that we are going through. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Inshallah. Anybody have any questions, any comments? Inshallah. I know one of the things, Thursday night, today's Tuesday, then tomorrow is work day, and this is after Salat al-Isha. We have this mindset that after Salat al-Isha, our day is finished. So inshallah, we pray that these small sessions won't be no more than 30, 35 minutes. If there are any questions and answers, we'll entertain them and then we'll stop. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Thanks for listening. You're going to put this table. You can put it like where the...
So the cloth is there.
Well, there's so much activity. You have so many groups who are moving in and out, so much. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. He took the mic, right?
I took the mic. I think the mic is here.
I think this one goes back to the security.
Go back to security?
This is the one that we like. Yeah, this one has to go back. Because they use it in the morning for the kids.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got it. I think Magic